Welcome back to Stormi Talks True Crime on my Girls Rock Productions channel. This week's story is one that captivated the world during the pandemic when the HBO docuseries The Jinx, the Life and Deaths of Robert Durst started streaming. It is a story of a man who some have called the unluckiest man alive, but others believe that there's just far too much coincidence. What's the old saying? Once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, but 3 times, well, you know the rest. This is the story of the infamous Robert Durst, the charismatic heir to the huge real estate brokerage who has been accused of killing his wife, his best friend, and a former contractor. And these are just the known murders in recent years. Durst has also been tied to other unsolved cases. Now, before I get started, I do want to apologize for the 2-week hiatus. I was needing a personal week to recharge, and then my birthday was past Tuesday. Shout out to all my other Aquariuses out there. So I fell a little behind, but I don't intend on missing any more time anytime soon. So let's go ahead and dive into the story and background of Robert Durst, the unluckiest man alive. Robert Durst was born April 12, 1943 to very successful real estate mogul Seymour Durst. He was the oldest of 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. He was always talked about how close he was to his mother when he was younger, and he was greatly scarred by her suicide when he was only 7 years old. He even claimed on multiple occasions to have actually seen his mother's suicide. In the Andrew Jarecki docuseries The Jinx, he actually talks about the story in his own words during the interview. He tells of his father waking him and walking him up to the window, looking out at his mother standing on the roof. He then stated that his father told him to say goodbye to his mother. He said that he remembered hearing her scream and then crash on the cement below. While this may have happened, Mr. Durst does seem very sincere in his interview while telling it. There is something odd about the way he tells this story. It sounds like he goes back into like a childlike state when talking about it, almost like he's putting on a performance or has a split personality. Not saying that he actually does, just giving my personal opinion on the public interview. So, in March of 2015 interview, Robert's younger brother, Douglas Durst, denied these claims. Douglas stated that it actually never happened, at least him witnessing the suicide. In this interview, Douglas brings up that he and Robert had to go to therapy for sibling rivalry, and with this, it was revealed by a psychiatrist back in 1953 that 10-year-old Robert Durst was showing signs of personality decomposition and possibly even schizophrenia. People who knew him from high school said that Durst was considered a loner. He would go on to receive his bachelor's degree in economics from Lehigh University in 1965, and later that year he would enroll into a doctoral program at UCLA, which is where he would meet Susan Berman. He would eventually withdraw from the program and move back to New York in 1969. During his time in LA, he and Susan grew very close. Susan was the daughter of a Bob Moss who had helped build Vegas. She looked up to her father, who, just like Durst's mother, died when she was very young. They bonded on this common sense of loss. Susan was heard to call him her best friend on numerous occasions, and vice versa. This is why they would still keep in touch after Durst moved back to New York. A little more on Susan Berman. She was an author who wrote about her late-in-life realization that her father was a mobster. She was born on May 18, 1945 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and was the only daughter of David Berman. Now, Susan swore up until her death that her father, who was a high-up in the Jewish American organized crime scene and took over the Flamingo Hotel when Bugsy Siegel's 1947 gangland murder happened, death was under mysterious circumstances. Berman grew up in Vegas and later in Hollywood, California. She got a Bachelor's of Arts from UCLA where she met Robert Durst. Now back to our story on Robert Durst. After moving back to New York in 1971, he met and fell in love with the dental hygienist Kathleen McCormick. Durst invited her to move in with him in his Vermont home after just 2 dates, and both moved to Manhattan in 1973, getting married on Durst's 30th birthday. Kathleen was born June 15, 1952 in Queens, New York. She is the sister of Jim McCormick and was described as full of life and very smart and sociable, and many people believed that she was actually out of Durst's league. At the time of Kathy's disappearance, she was in her 4th and final year at medical school at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx. She was hoping to become a pediatrician and was a few months away from getting her degree. She was last seen by someone other than Durst on the evening of January 31st, 1982, when she appeared unexpectedly to a dinner party which was being thrown by her friend Gilberta Najami in Newtown, Connecticut. Najami could see that Kathleen seemed upset and that she was wearing red sweatpants, which Najami found odd because Kathleen never dressed so casually in public. After receiving a phone call from her husband, McCormick left for her cottage in South Salem, New York. Although the couple was known to have fought that evening, Durst initially maintained that he had put his wife on a commuter train to New York at Katona rail station, had a drink with a neighbor, and spoken to his wife at their Manhattan apartment by telephone later that evening. "That's what I told police," said Durst. "I was hoping that would make everything go away." He subsequently admitted that he went home and went to bed. Najami was supposed to meet up with Kathy the next day at the Lion's Gate, a Manhattan pub. When Kathy failed to appear, Najami grew concerned and repeatedly called the police over the course of several days. Later that week, Durst reported his wife missing. Both a doorman and the building superintendent of the couple's apartment on Riverside Drive claimed to have seen McCormick at the building on February 1st, the day after she was last indisputably seen. The doorman additionally said that he had only seen her from behind and from half a block away, and thus could not be certain that it was her. A private investigator hired by Durst's lawyer later reported that the doorman said that he had not seen McCormick arrive at all, and might not have even been working the night she disappeared. Only 3 weeks after Robert reported his wife missing, the superintendent on Riverside Drive found some of her possessions in the building's trash compactor. 3 weeks before her disappearance, McCormick had been treated at the Bronx Jacobi Medical Center for facial bruises. She told a friend that Durst had beaten her, but did not press charges over the incident. McCormick asked Durst for a $250,000 divorce settlement. Instead, he canceled her credit card, removed her name from the joint bank account, and refused to pay her medical school tuition. At the time of McCormick's disappearance, Durst had been dating Prudence Farrow, Mia Farrow's sister, for 3 years and was living in a separate apartment. Durst did initially offer $100,000 for his wife's return, but then reduced the reward to $15,000. When one of McCormick's friends and her sister learned that she had been reported missing, they broke into her South Salem cottage hoping to find her. Instead, they discovered the resident ransacked, McCormick's mail unopened, and her belongings in the trash. After McCormick's disappearance, the New York City Police Department said that Durst had claimed to have last spoken to her when she called him from the Riverside Drive apartment. He maintained that the last time he had seen her was at Katona Station, where she was planning to board the 9:15 p.m. train to Manhattan. He also claimed that on February 4th, the supervisor at her medical school telephoned her to say that she had been absent from class all week after calling in sick on February 1st. Whether McCormick made that call herself is still unknown. In 2016, her family asked to have Kathleen declared legally dead, a request that was granted the following year. Kathleen's mother, Ann McCormick, attempted to sue Durst for $100 million, alleging that he killed her daughter and deprived her parents of the right to bury her. The parents are now deceased. Kathleen's younger sister, Mary McCormick Hughes, also believes that Durst murdered her. The New York State Police quietly reopened the criminal investigation into the disappearance in 1999, searching the South Salem cottage for the first time. The investigation became public in November of 2000. Durst officially divorced McCormick 8 years after her disappearance, claiming spousal abandonment. Just a month after he divorced Kathleen, he married Deborah Lee Cheriton, who was a pretty well-known name in the real estate industry herself. Deborah Lee Cheriton started her own brokerage that hired only female realtors, and it was the first all-female brokerage firm in New York. Within a few days of marrying Deborah, Durst was on a solo trip out to California. It was while he was in California that his so-called best friend, Susan Berman, was murdered. Many of Kathleen's friends and family believed that Susan and Deborah were two of the only people, other than Robert himself, who knew about what really happened to Kathy that night. Many of her loved ones believed that it was actually Susan who called in sick on February 1st. It was very unlikely for a medical student to call out sick, and she definitely wouldn't be listing off all of her symptoms to her supervisor on her first day of a new residency. So it seems that he married one and killed the other to make sure neither would testify against him. On December 24, 2000, Berman was found murdered execution style in her own home in Benedict Canyon, Los Angeles, after her neighbors called the police to report that her door had been opened and one of her dogs was loose. A few days later, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department, postmarked December 23rd, contained Berman's address and the word cadaver. On the envelope, Beverly was misspelled as Beverley. As I stated earlier, Durst was known to have been in Northern California days before Berman's death and to have flown from San Francisco to New York the night before her body was found. Berman had recently received $50,000 from Durst in 2 payments. Although Durst did confirm to the LAPD that he had sent Berman $25,000 and faxed investigators a copy of her 1982 deposition regarding his wife's disappearance, he declined to be further questioned about the murder. Durst said in a 2005 deposition that Berman called him shortly before her death to say that LAPD wanted to talk to her about McCormick's disappearance. A study of case notes by The Guardian cast doubts that LAPD had made such a call, or whether then Westchester County District Attorney Janine Piero had scheduled an interview with Berman at all. After being tipped off by his sister Wendy that the McCormick investigation had been reopened, Durst went into hiding in Galveston, Texas, disguising himself as a mute middle-aged woman to avoid police inquiries. A biographer of Susan Berman, Kathy Scott, as well as many others, believes that Durst killed her because Susan knew too much about Kathy McCormick's disappearance. On November 15, 2000, Galveston landlord Klaus Rene Dillman was contacted via telephone by a man claiming to serve as the aide to a deaf-mute woman named Dorothy Kiner. Dillman went on to say that Dorothy was a very good tenant who kept to herself, was traveling all the time, and paid her rent in advance. He also stated that there was a man that he believed to be her brother who would often stay in the apartment while she was away, but he never seen the two together, because that's not suspicious at all. Anyway, on October 9, 2001, Durst was arrested in Galveston shortly after the body parts belonging to his elderly neighbor, 71-year-old Morris Black, were found floating in the Galveston Bay. He was released on a $250,000 bail and fled to Pennsylvania. On November 30th, Durst was caught inside a Wegmans supermarket in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, after trying to shoplift Band-Aids, a newspaper, and a chicken salad sandwich, despite having $500 in his pocket. Among the items discovered in his rental car were $37,000 in cash, 2 guns, marijuana, Black's driver's license, and directions to Gilberte Najami's home in Connecticut. Durst also used his time on the run to stalk his brother Douglas, who Durst resented since his father decided to have Douglas take over the real estate company, visiting the driveway of his home in Katona, New York, while armed. Durst employed defense attorney John Waldron while he was held on charges in Pennsylvania, and he was eventually extradited back to Texas for trial. In 2003, Durst finally would face charges for the first of the 3 murders, the murder and dismemberment of Morris Black. On the death of Black, the prosecution presented the jury with only a charge of capital murder, with no lesser murder or manslaughter charges. Durst employed defense attorney Dick DeGuerin and claimed self-defense. DeGuerin conducted 2 mock trials in preparation for the case. Durst's defense team found communicating with him to be quite difficult and hired psychiatrist Milton Ashler to investigate. After spending 70 hours examining him, Ashler diagnosed Durst with Asperger's syndrome, saying his whole life story is compatible with a diagnosis of Asperger's disorder. His defense team argued at trial that the diagnosis explained his behavior. Durst claimed Black, known to be a cranky and confrontational loner, grabbed his .22 caliber target pistol from its hiding place and threatened him with it. During the struggle for the pistol, the weapon discharged, shooting Black in the face. During cross-examination, Durst did admit to using a paring knife, 2 saws, and an axe to dismember Black's body before bagging and dumping his remains in Galveston Bay. Black's head was never recovered, so prosecutors were unable to present sufficient forensic evidence to dispute Durst's account of the struggle. As a result of lack of forensics, the jury acquitted Durst of the murder on November 11, 2003. On December 21, 2004, Durst pleaded guilty to 2 counts of bail jumping and 1 count of evidence tampering for his dismemberment of Black's body. As part of the plea deal, he received a sentence of 5 years and was given credit for time served, requiring him to serve 3 years in prison. He was paroled in July of 2005. The rules of his release required him to stay near home, and permission was required to travel. That December, Durst made an unauthorized trip to the boarding house where Black was killed and to a nearby shopping mall. At the mall, he ran into former Galveston trial judge Susan Chris, who had presided over his trial. Due to this incident, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles determined that Durst had violated the terms of his parole and returned him to jail. He was released again from custody in March of 2006. When asked in March of 2015 whether she believed Durst murdered Black, Chris commented, "You could see that this person knew what they were doing, and it was not the first time. The body was cut perfectly, like a surgeon who knew how to use a tool on this bone and a certain kind of tool on that muscle. It looked like not a first-time job." That was pretty scary. Private investigator Bobby Baca argues Morris Black had known Durst years prior and was likely involved in the disappearance of Kathleen in 1982. In the docuseries The Jinx, Susan Berman's stepson uncovered a 1999 letter written by Durst which contained the same Beverly Hills typo as the anonymous letter directing police to Berman's body, implicating Durst in the murder. Now, if you watch the series like I did, you watch as the producers and Jarecki planned on trapping Durst in his lies. Since Durst said earlier on in the interviews that the killer had to have been the one who had sent the cadaver letter. They had handwriting analysts confirm that it was more than likely Durst's handwriting, as well as the misspelling. While they were trying to set up this final part of the interview, Robert kept dodging and rescheduling their meetings. This news led to the indictment of Robert Durst for the first-degree murder of his best friend, Susan Berman. The FBI arrested Durst in New Orleans on the eve of the broadcast of the final episode. That first season ends with Durst trying to continue to deny the letter while on camera and then excusing himself to go to the bathroom. While he was in the bathroom, his mic recorded him saying what sounds like, "There it is, you're caught. You're right, of course, but you can't imagine the rest of them. I don't know what it's in the house. Oh, I want this. What a disaster. He was right. I was wrong. And the burping. I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course." It would later come out in 2019 that the filmmakers altered the sequence of Durst's comments, increasing the apparent severity of his musings in the bathroom. On March 14, 2015, days after the first-degree murder warrant was signed by an LA judge alleging the role by Durst in relation to the Berman killing. Durst was arrested by FBI agents at the Canal Street Marriott in New Orleans, where he had registered under the false name of Everett Ward. Durst, who had been tracked to the hotel after making 2 calls to check his voicemail, was observed wandering aimlessly in the lobby and mumbling to himself, having driven to New Orleans from Houston 4 days before. In addition to the .38 caliber revolver loaded with 4 live rounds and 1 spent shell casing, police recovered 5 ounces of marijuana, Durst's birth certificate and passport, maps of Louisiana, Florida, and Cuba, a flesh-toned latex mask, the fake Texas ID card used to check into the hotel, a new cell phone, and cash totaling to $42,631. Police discovered a UPS tracking number, which led to an additional $117,000 cash and a pair of shoes in a package sent to Durst by a friend in New York, which was seized after his arrest. Bank statements found in one of Durst's Houston condominium revealed cash withdrawals of $315,000 in little more than a month. It is believed that Durst was planning to flee to Cuba after the HBO documentary aired, since the U.S. and Cuba have no extradition treaty. The next day after the arrest, New York State Police investigator Joseph Beccaro, long involved in the McCormick case and said to have been working closely with the FBI and LA detectives, removed some 60 file boxes from Durst's personal papers and effects from the home of Durst's friend Susan T. Giordano in Campbell Hall, New York. All of these items had been sent to Giordano for safekeeping 3 years prior by Durst's then-wife, Deborah Lee Cheriton. Also stored in Giordano's residence were videotaped depositions of Durst, his brother Douglas, and Cheriton, all of which were related to the Black case. LA County District Attorney John Lewin, in charge of prosecuting Durst, immediately flew to New Orleans after his arrest. With Durst's permission, Lewin interviewed him for 3 hours without a lawyer present. The recorded questioning was later introduced as evidence in the Berman trial. In regards to the investigation, Lewin claimed to have found information uncovered by the filmmakers of the Jinx to be compelling and repeatedly flew to New York to interview witnesses, including friends of Durst and Berman. Durst's trial concerning the Berman killing was scheduled to begin in LA after Durst was arraigned in California, but his transfer was delayed by the U.S. Bureau of Prisons due to serious surgery, according to DeGuerin. A conditional hearing was convened in February of 2017, where Nick Shaven, a close friend of Durst and at whose wedding Durst served as best man, testified that Durst had personally confided to him to having murdered Berman. A preliminary hearing was initially scheduled for October 2017, but was postponed to April 2018 to accommodate Durst's defense team, some of who suffered damage to their homes and offices from Hurricane Harvey. The pre-trial hearings included extensive testimony from a number of older witnesses who potentially had not been available when the trial began. In October 2018, LA County Superior Court Judge Mark Wyndham ruled that enough evidence existed to try Durst for the murder of Susan Berman, and that he would be arraigned November 8, 2018. During his court appearance the following day, Durst pleaded not guilty. In January 2019, Wyndham set the Durst trial date as September 3, 2019. At the same time, Judge Wyndham ruled that the prosecutors could present evidence involving the Black murder. Prosecutors would try to connect Berman's death with McCormick's disappearance, which they argued was the foundation for the motive of the murder. In his ruling that the prosecutors could use evidence from the Texas case, Judge Wyndham said that the killings of Black and Berman seemed to be intertwined. The murder charge against Durst included the special circumstance allegations of lying in wait and killing a witness to a crime. It was further alleged that Durst had used a handgun to carry out the murder. In May 2019, a motion filed by Durst's attorneys claimed 2 handwriting samples, the anonymous cadaver note to the Beverly Hills Police, and a letter in 1999 from Durst to Berman, along with evidence from his 2015 arrests, were obtained in a violation of the Fourth Amendment, thus moving for their exclusion. On May 8th, LA County prosecutors filed an affidavit replying to the motion, charging that Durst was creating an elaborate conspiracy theory between HBO filmmakers and law enforcement officers and the LA County District Attorney's Office to make Durst incriminate himself. On May 17th, Wyndham granted Durst's defense team a 4-month postponement of his trial after they raised concerns about the volume of evidence in the case and conflicts with attorney schedules. On September 3, 2019, Wyndham rejected an attempt by Durst's attorneys to strip the producers of the Jinx of production under California's Journalist Shield law by having them declared government agents. A number of other procedural rulings also went against Durst. Lewin set another hearing on discovery and other matters on October 28th. In a surprise move, however, on December 24, 2019, Durst's lawyers contradicted his previous statements and filed court documents admitting that Durst wrote the cadaver note. In all previous statements, Durst consistently had denied writing the note, although the handwriting appeared to be similar to his own, as well as the misspelling of the word Beverly contained in the prior letter to Berman that Durst admitted to writing. During the filming of the Jinx, Durst told the filmmakers that the person who wrote the cadaver note was taking a big risk because it was something that only the killer could have written. He told his godson, Howard Altman, the person who wrote the note killed her. However, in August 2019, Durst's attorneys were also argued what the note demonstrates is that the person who mailed it was aware that there was a body at the house, not that the individual murdered Susan Berman. On March 2, 2020, Durst appeared in court to begin his trial, which was expected to take several months, but the proceedings were postponed amid the COVID-19 pandemic. In June 2020, a motion by the defense for a mistrial because of the delay was denied. The following month, Wyndham ruled that further delay until April 2021 was necessary due to the pandemic, but he would allow the trial to proceed if Durst had agreed to a bench trial without a jury. Durst declined this option, and the trial was scheduled to resume on April 12, 2020. When it was then postponed until May 17, 2021. On May 13th, Durst's lawyers filed a motion with the court saying Durst had developed bladder cancer and moved that the court postpone the trial indefinitely and to release him on bail to receive medical treatments he was currently being provided. The motion was denied by the court and the trial did resume on May 17th, with Wyndham questioning jurors about whether they could still remain neutral in the case after a 14-month break. On June 10, 2021, Durst was hospitalized after being found down and not in his wheelchair. Wyndham sent the jury home with plans to resume on June 14th. Lewin expressed his suspicion that the defendant was faking a medical crisis to force a mistrial because he was on record in his calls from county jail saying he intended to feign dementia or seek a mistrial due to COVID. I have no idea whether this is legitimate or not, but obviously, given his history, is certainly suspect as to what his actual condition is. When you note that Durst's lawyers had sought mistrials twice during the previous day's testimony, the prosecutor added, "It's very clear that the defense and the defendant want this trial to go away." Jail doctors determined that Durst was able to appear in court after the emergency hospitalization, which was for a UTI and sepsis, and Wyndham reconvened the trial on June 14th. Durst was unable to dress himself and was in court in his wheelchair, jail uniform, with a catheter bag, and covered in a large blanket. As testimony continued, Durst's brother, Douglas, appeared as a prosecution witness on June 28th, saying that he was reluctant to appear at the trial and was doing so under threat of subpoena. Douglas was asked about his relationship with his brother. His response was, He'd like to murder me. I hired security today. I have fear that my brother has threatened to kill me, and I have fear that he may have means to do so. On July 29th, Durst's defense team asked again for an emergency halt to the case based on his poor medical condition, saying that he was not able to testify on his own behalf, but was again rejected on August 2nd, with Wyndham giving numerous examples of Durst's competency. The prosecution closed its case against Durst after 11 weeks of presenting evidence, primarily consisting of friends and associates of Berman, saying she told them she was the alibi for Durst when his wife disappeared, and that he had done something and she needed to do something as well. Shaven testified that Durst told him, "I had to do it. It was her or me. I had no choice." The defense opened up its case with extensive testimony from false memory expert Elizabeth Loftus, questioning the decades ago recollections of prosecution witnesses. Although highly unusual for a murder case, Durst himself was expected to testify on his own behalf on August 5th, 2021, but the court was adjourned until August 9th due to a positive COVID-19 test of a relative of Durst's legal team who had been attending the trial. Durst appeared on the stand for 14 days under questioning from Lewin, who gave seemingly endless examples of Durst's propensity to lie. Lewin countered Durst to the point he admitted to lying while under oath in the Morris Black trial in 2003, and that he lied 5 times while on the stand in the present trial. Durst and Loftus were the only witnesses called by the defense. 3 days after the jury was charged with reaching the verdict, on September 17, 2021, Robert Durst was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Susan Berman. He was also found guilty of multiple special charges and was facing a life sentence. Durst's lawyers filed a motion with Wyndham to request a new trial. The reasoning they gave was that there was no physical evidence presented. Witnesses for the prosecution were not to be believed, and the entire prosecution case was nothing but an unproven theory. Durst was sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole on October 14, 2021. 2 days after the sentencing, Durst tested positive for COVID-19 and was placed on a ventilator. The request from Durst to have a new trial was denied by the court in view of the abundance of evidence of Durst's guilt. Durst's legal team immediately filed appeals in the California legal system. Durst died of cardiac arrest at the San Joaquin General Hospital in French Camp, California, on January 10, 2022, at the age of 78. He had been undergoing testing when he went into cardiac arrest and did not respond to resuscitation. At the time of his death, Durst remained in custody of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. As such, Durst's appeals may be dismissed by the California Court of Appeals, and the conviction set aside as his death prevented the appeals from being heard. Aside from these 3 murders that Durst was all but proven to have committed, none in self-defense in my opinion, there are a few other cases that might be connected to Durst. Days after the Berman murder, police were reportedly examining connections between Durst and the disappearances of 18-year-old Lynn Schultz from Middlebury, Vermont, and 16-year-old Karen Mitchell from Eureka, California. Lynn Schultz was a Middlebury College freshman. She visited Durst's health food store on December 10, 1971, the day she disappeared, and was last seen that afternoon near a bus stop across from the store. Author and investigative journalist Matt Birkbeck reported in 2003, and again in his 2015 book A Deadly Secret, that credit card records placed Durst in Eureka on November 25, 1997, the day that Karen Mitchell vanished. Mitchell may have volunteered in a homeless shelter Durst frequented. Durst dressed up in women's clothing and visited Eureka shoe store owned by Mitchell's aunt. Mitchell was last seen walking to work from her aunt's store and talking to someone in a stopped car. A witness sketch of Mitchell's presumed abductor resembles Durst. While the FBI was never able to connect Durst to the Long Island serial murders, in which some of the victims were disposed of in a similar manner to black killing. The Bureau created an informal task force in 2012 to work with investigative agencies in jurisdictions where Durst was known to have lived in past decades, including Vermont, New York, and California. In the wake of his arrest, the FBI encouraged such localities to re-examine cold cases. Texas private investigator Bobby Baca also traced Durst to operating under stolen identities in Texas, Florida, Massachusetts, New Jersey, South Carolina, Mississippi, and Virginia. In fact, Dorothy Kiner was actually a stolen identity of a woman in Oklahoma. So that is the story of the unluckiest man alive. At least if you truly believe all these deaths around him were a coincidence. Robert Durst got away with the disappearance and murder of his first wife for almost 40 years, with the help from his friends, business associates, and family. And of course, money, until his paranoia finally got the best of him. Feel free to discuss your thoughts on this story in the comments below, or give suggestions on other cases you may want to hear about. Remember to like the video and subscribe to my Girls Rock Productions channel. While you're here, check out some of my other playlists. On Stormi Teaches Music, I do live covers and guitar lessons on Mondays and Wednesdays at 11 p.m. Eastern. I haven't quite started those back up yet because there have been a lot of different things going on, but right now I need to get a some new guitar strings and a new stringing tool, because my daughter broke mine. So it might take a couple more weeks there. But once I do get it started back up, I will do live covers on Monday at 11 p.m. Eastern, and then lesson for the song I covered on Wednesdays. On Stormi Talks Ghost Stories, I talk about a different haunted city each month and tell true ghost stories out of those cities. These videos are posted Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to tune in next Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern for next week's video on Stormi Talks True Crime. Until then, have a great week and stay safe.